He thought his silence was strength. He believed that by carrying the weight without complaint, he was protecting her. He believed that by not burdening her with his fears, his doubts, his slow erosion, he was being noble. He believed that by enduring it all quietly, stoically, invisibly, he was being the man she needed. But what he never understood is that silence without truth is not strength. It's starvation. It's the slow death of intimacy dressed in masculine pride. And so he endured. When he was hurting, he said nothing. When he was unsure, he smiled. When he felt lost, he became more useful. And every day, he built a fortress around his pain, convinced that if he just held on long enough, if he just stayed reliable, if he just kept showing up, she would feel safe. But the silence that was meant to make her feel protected became the very wall that pushed her away, because she never left the man who failed her. She left the man who hid from her. She left because he became a ghost inside his own life, because she could feel his absence. Even when he sat right beside her, she could feel the words he never said piling up behind his eyes. She could feel the part of him that no longer trusted her with his truth. And you can only reach for someone for so long, before your hands go numb, before your heart goes tired, before your soul realizes it's not rejection that hurts the most, it's invisibility. He thought he was protecting her. But what she wanted wasn't protection. It was presence. She didn't need a man who could endure everything in silence. She needed a man who could share the weight, who could sit with her, raw and unguarded, who could bleed in front of her without shame, who could let her in. Because love isn't forged in invincibility. It's forged in vulnerability. But somewhere along the way, he was taught that being a man meant being a vault. That feeling was weakness. That speaking was surrender. That being vulnerable meant being less of a man. So he armored up. He built his emotional discipline like a fortress. He turned pain into productivity, doubt into overfunctioning, fear into silent resilience. And she watched as he slowly disappeared behind that mask of masculine nobility, until one day there was nothing left to reach for. Only routines, only roles, only a man who said, "I'm fine," with eyes that said, "Help me." But she couldn't help him, because he never let her in. And that's why she left. Not because he failed, not because he wasn't enough, but because he never gave her the real him. And without that, without the raw, unfiltered truth of who he was beyond the performance, there was nothing left to hold. He endured in silence. And that silence, it cost him everything. Because silence, when it's not sacred, becomes a slow surrender to invisibility. She didn't want his perfection. She didn't need a statue of strength that never wavered. She wanted his presence, his chaos, his ache, his questions, not as weakness, but as intimacy. Because she never asked for a superhero. She asked for a man who was brave enough to be seen in his fullness, a man who didn't need to bleed on the world, but who could bleed with her. And when that man disappeared into the rituals of silent suffering, when he buried himself beneath the weight of unspoken truths, she began to grieve a man who hadn't even left yet. Because when the heart of a man is locked behind walls of endurance, the woman beside him becomes a stranger. She starts to question her own worth, starts wondering why he won't let her in, starts doubting whether she's truly safe in his world or merely occupying space in it. And he wonders why she grows distant, why her laughter softens, why her touch becomes mechanical, why the space between them feels like a canyon that words can't cross anymore. He wonders, but he still says nothing, because that's what he was taught. Real men carry their pain in silence. But what no one taught him was that silence over time, becomes a betrayal, not just of her, but of himself. He didn't just lose her. He lost the parts of himself he never gave voice to. He lost the chance to be truly known, to be seen in the kind of way that doesn't weaken you, but witnesses you. And when a man isn't witnessed in his truth, he becomes a shadow, a provider, a protector, a performer, everything except alive. She would have held his hand through the storm. She would have fought beside him, cried with him, built with him, if only he'd let her see the war. But he fought it alone. And in that choice, to protect her from his darkness, he robbed her of the chance to love him in it. Because love is not made in the light. It's proven in the shadows. And she left, not because she didn't love him, but because he never let her love all of him. And maybe now, long after she's gone, he finally understands that it wasn't the arguments that broke them. It wasn't the silence after the shouting. It was the silence that came before it. The silence that never spoke up, never asked for help, never said, I'm scared too. The silence that wore a smile when his soul was sinking. The silence that said, I'm fine, while everything inside was unraveling, because there is a cost to wearing the mask too long. At first, it protects you. Then, it isolates you. Then, it replaces you, until even you forget what your own voice sounds like in a moment of truth. And when that happens, when your woman no longer sees your heart because you've hidden it so long, she stops fighting for something that no longer shows up. And it's easy to call her disloyal, easy to say she changed, easy to blame her for walking away. But she didn't walk away from the man she loved. She walked away from the man who stopped being him. The man who chose endurance over expression, numbness over truth, control over connection. And maybe, just maybe, he looks back and realizes she never needed him to fix everything. She just needed to see him, to feel him, to be let into the storm, not shielded from it, to be trusted enough to carry it together. Because what broke her heart was not the weight of the world. It was the weight of loving someone who would not let her in. And now, in the stillness of what could have been, he sits with the truth that enduring in silence isn't heroic. It's hiding. That suffering alone isn't noble. It's unnecessary. That protecting her from his pain was not strength. It was fear. Fear of being seen. Fear of being less than perfect. Fear of being loved as a whole man, not just a useful one. But love, real love, never asked him to be perfect. It asked him to be present. And that, more than anything, is what she needed. Not his silence, not his protection, but his truth. The raw, unedited truth that would have cracked his voice, maybe even brought him to his knees, but would have opened the door to connection, to understanding, to the kind of intimacy that only exists when two souls agree to stop pretending. But he waited too long. He kept the mask on through the pain, through the doubt, through the moments when her eyes silently pleaded, let me in. And by the time he was ready to speak, she was already gone. Not because she wanted to leave, but because she no longer believed he would ever arrive. He had become a man so committed to being strong that he forgot what real strength is. Not endurance, revelation, not control, transparency, not silent suffering, but the courage to bleed where love can reach it. She would have held his scars like scripture. She would have kissed the darkness he was ashamed of. But he gave her a wall when she asked for a window. He gave her a performance when she begged for presence. And now he carries the echo of what he never said, the late night ache of unspoken words, the quiet guilt of withheld truth, the heavy realization that In trying to keep her from his pain, he kept her from his heart. And that's why she lived. Not because he wasn't enough, but because he never let her see the enoughness he buried beneath silence. So to every man still holding it all in, hear this. Your silence will not save you. Your performance will not keep her. Your endurance will not earn you intimacy. She doesn't want your perfection. She wants you, all of you, the strong, the scared, the uncertain. She wants your unpolished truth, because the man who dares to be centrally seen is the man she can finally trust. And trust, that is what holds love together when everything else falls apart. So speak, bleed, fall, if you must, but let her in before she learns to live without the sound of your voice, before she forgets the weight of your truth, before your silence becomes the reason she no longer waits at the door. Because one day, when the silence becomes louder than your love, you will understand. Enduring alone is not strength. Enduring alone is how you lose everything you were trying to protect. And when that day comes, when the silence is all that's left, it won't feel noble. It won't feel masculine. It will feel empty. A stillness that no longer holds peace, only echoes. Echoes of, what if I had spoken? Echoes of, what if I had let her see me before I disappeared? Echoes of love that never touched skin, never reached soul, because it was locked behind pride dressed as protection. And you'll walk through your memories like old rooms in a house that no longer belongs to you. Rooms where she waited. Rooms where she reached. Rooms where she wept. Not because you were weak, but because you wouldn't let her feel it with you. You thought you were sparing her the burden. But in truth, you robbed her of the one thing she truly wanted. A connection forged in rawness. Not the polished version of you. Not the provider. Not the protector. But the man unmasked, unguarded, unhidden. That is the man she wanted to trust. That is the man she longed to follow. That is the man she could have built something eternal with. And the tragedy? He was always there. He just never let himself be seen. So now, if there's anything left to hold on to, let it be this. Your silence is not your safety. It is your sacrifice. And the more you sacrifice your truth on the altar of appearing strong, the more you sacrifice the very love your heart aches for. You don't protect her by disappearing. You protect her by being present, by letting her hold you when you fall, by letting her feel your truth, even when it's messy, by trusting that her love is not so fragile it breaks at the sight of your wounds. She does not want your armor. She wants your aliveness. So drop the act. Speak the words. Tear down the damn wall. And if it's too late for her to return, then let this be the lesson you carry like a torch for the rest of your life. You did not lose her because you were broken. You lost her because you refused to be seen. And love can only hold what it is brave enough to witness. So be seen, be heard, be felt, before your silence becomes the only thing she remembers. Because nothing haunts a man more than the love he buried with his silence. Not because it died, but because he starved it. Starved it of honesty, of presence, of the simple sacred courage to say, I'm not okay, and I need you to see that. Not to fix it, not to rescue him, but to meet him in that place, that raw place, that human place, that place where real connection lives not in perfection, but in shared presence. Because the moment you start filtering your truth, the moment you start editing your emotions for her comfort, you're not protecting her. You're distancing her. And she feels it. She might not be able to name it, but she feels the shift. The subtle recoil in your touch, The way your eyes avoid hers in moments that used to be sacred. The way your body is present, but your spirit is somewhere else entirely. She feels the weight of everything you won't say. She carries it without asking. She grows tired without knowing why. And eventually, she stops asking. She stops reaching. She stops hoping. Because how long can a woman chase a ghost? How long can she water a garden that never lets her see what's dying beneath the soil? You may still be there every day, every dinner, every conversation. But if your truth isn't there with you, she's already alone. And no woman stays where she has to fight for intimacy that should be freely given. So if you've been quiet for too long, if you've been holding it in, smiling through it, enduring like it's a badge of honor, ask yourself, what am I protecting? And at what cost? Because every unspoken truth is a brick in the wall between you. And eventually, love suffocates behind that wall, not with a scream, but with a whisper, the whisper of a woman who once felt close, now feeling like a stranger in her own home. Don't let it get to that point. Don't let your silence write the ending you never wanted. Let her in, let you in. Because no man is truly strong until he's strong enough to be seen. Seen not as an image, but as a man. Flawed, feeling alive, not armored in stoicism, but anchored in truth. And if you think silence is what keeps her close, remember this. What she craves isn't a fortress. It's a fire. Not the fire of rage. Not the fire of chaos. But the steady, honest, human fire that says, I feel this. I'm afraid sometimes. I carry weight too heavy to name, but I want you beside me as I carry it. That fire is not weakness. It's the beginning of real intimacy. Because intimacy doesn't come from being strong all the time. It comes from trusting someone with your storm. From saying, I've built the walls. I've kept you out, but not anymore. From tearing down everything you built to hide so that love has somewhere to land. Because love doesn't grow in silence. It grows in the sound of your truth, in your trembling honesty, in the moment you drop the act, drop the armor, drop the idea that you have to carry it all alone, and finally speak. That's when she feels you. That's when the connection comes alive again. That's when she softens. That's when she stays. Not because you're perfect, but because you finally gave her the one thing she was waiting for all along, access to your heart. So if there's anything left in you, any ember, any whisper, any trace of what used to be real, let it speak before the silence becomes permanent, before your endurance becomes your exile, before your silence becomes the reason she forgets what your love ever sounded like. Speak, feel, break if you must, but let her see the man behind the mask. Let her feel the soul behind the silence. Because that man, the one brave enough to be seen, is the only one she was ever truly waiting for. And if you do that, if you strip yourself bare of the pretense, the posturing, the silent self-punishment, you'll feel something you may not have felt in years. Relief, not because the pain vanishes, but because you're no longer carrying it alone. Because now, someone sees it. Now, someone feels it with you. Now, someone can finally love you not for your mess, but for your mess. And that's the kind of love that endures, not the love that requires you to shrink, not the love that demands you remain stoic and silent, not the love that only survives when everything is fine, but the kind that wraps around your soul even when you're broken, the kind that holds space for all of you. That kind of love can only exist if you show up as all of you. And yes, there's risk. Yes, there's vulnerability. Yes, it might scare her. It might even scare you. But that risk is the price of real connection. Without it, all you have is performance. And Performance will keep her entertained for a while, until one day she wakes up and realizes she's in love with a role. Not a man, a mask, a ghost. So if she's still there, if she's still reaching, still asking, still holding space, do not waste it. Do not wait until her silence matches yours. Do not wait until her patience becomes resignation. Do not wait until her love turns into grief. Because when she finally walks away, it won't be because she stopped loving you. It will be because she finally accepted that you would never let her love the real you. And that's a pain no woman should have to carry. So speak now. Break now. Let go now. Let it all fall apart if it must. Because maybe what you built in silence was never your life. It was your prison. And the only way to escape it is to be seen fully, finally, unapologetically. Because when the silence is gone and your truth stands bare in the light, that's when love begins again. Not the old love, built on roles and assumptions, but the kind of love that heals, that deepens, that lasts. And all it takes is the courage to let her see you before it's too late. Because if you wait until she's gone, until her footsteps have faded, until her scent no longer lingers in your bed, until the air in the room is heavy with the kind of emptiness that doesn't echo back, then you'll understand. Silence was never strength. It was a slow goodbye, a daily erosion of intimacy, so quiet, so gradual that you didn't even hear it leaving, until it was gone, until the laughter died, until the touch felt foreign, until her eyes stopped searching for yours, and you were left holding not her, but the version of her that once tried to reach you through the wall. But make no mistake, she didn't want to leave. She stayed longer than she should have, hoping, waiting, praying you'd finally say what only you could say. Here I am, all of me, not the strong one, not the silent one, the real one. But you never said it. You wore your pain like armor and called it maturity. You mistook suppression for peace, control for presence, endurance for connection. And in the process, you lost the most sacred thing a man can be given, a woman's trust in your truth. That trust is not built on how much you carry. It's built on how honestly you carry it. It's built when she sees your hands shake and you don't hide them. When your voice cracks and you let it. When your soul breaks open, not for the world, but for her. That's what makes her stay. Not perfection, permission. Permission to meet you in your humanness. To walk with you in the dark without being shut out. To hold you not just as a provider, not just as a protector, but as a partner. You thought silence made you safe. But all it did was make you unreachable. And now you know. There's no strength in silence if it costs you the one thing you were trying to keep. Love. Real, untamed, soul-shaking love. So if you're reading this and she's still there, speak. Not with poetry. Not with promises. Just with presence. Because you don't need the perfect words. You only need the courage to be seen. Before the silence finishes what your fear began. Before the woman who was willing to love all of you learns how to live without any of you. And then, one day, he sat there, no more laughter, no more warmth, no more eyes looking into his soul as if to say, I see you, all of you, only silence. The same silence he once chose. Silence when she needed his voice. Silence when she reached with open hands, hoping for his truth. Silence when her heart whispered, are you still in there? He was there, but only in body. A shadow of a man who believed suffering alone was love. That holding it all in was protection. But that silence, it killed the one thing she needed most, his truth. Now he understands. Now it's too late, because what made her leave wasn't his weakness. It was his refusal to let her see it. She didn't need a monument. She needed a man who could collapse in her arms and still be whole. So if she's still there, if there's still a chance, even a flicker, speak. If she's still holding on, even by a thread, don't let silence be the last thing she remembers you by. Let her see the man. Not the perfect one, not the unbreakable one, but the real one. Because if you don't let her love the truth of who you are, then one day you will lose her. Not because she walked away, but because you never gave her anyone to stay for. They told you power was in the voice that shouted the loudest, that it lived in dominance, that it required intimidation, that to be a man you had to carry a blade at your side and a wall around your heart. But they were wrong, because the kind of power they sold you is a counterfeit mask glued to a hollow face, parading through a world that confuses fear with leadership. Real masculine power doesn't roar, it doesn't flinch, it doesn't force, it radiates. It arrives like thunder rolling over a quiet field. It moves like time inevitable, unhurried, and completely unaffected by whether or not you recognize its presence. And it begins the moment your ego ends. Not when you suppress it, not when you deny it, but when you transcend it. The ego is not your enemy. It is your initiation. It is the storm you must walk through, the shadow you must see without judgment, the beast you must train not with chains, but with awareness. Because a boy confuses ego with strength. But the man, he knows better. He knows that the louder the mask speaks, the quieter the soul becomes. That the more you chase validation, the further you drift from truth. That the need to impress is the surest sign of insecurity. True masculine power doesn't need applause. It doesn't need explanation. It doesn't need the spotlight. It is forged in silence. It's carved out of solitude, those long nights where you strip yourself bare and stand in front of your reflection, not to admire, but to witness. To witness the man behind the act, to confront the parts of you that you built to survive, but now keep you from becoming. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But becoming demands a death, the death of the ego, the death of performance, the death of the image you've been polishing while your soul was starving. And it's not glamorous. It's brutal, because no one claps for the man who goes dark to meet himself. No one celebrates when you choose silence over posturing, when you walk away from easy wins to preserve your integrity, when you stop chasing the world and start confronting your wounds. But that's where it begins. That's where you begin. Masculine power is not in the flex. It's in the focus. It's not in control over others. It's in control over yourself. It's not in how many obey you. It's in how deeply you obey your own truth. You want to feel powerful? Then kill the part of you that needs to be seen. Kill the part that needs revenge. Kill the part that thinks manhood is measured in conquest instead of character. And in its place, let presence rise. The kind of presence that speaks louder than status. The kind that holds space like gravity. The kind that doesn't chase but attracts. Because the man who has ended his ego is magnetic not because he wants to be, but because he's free. And nothing is more irresistible than freedom. He has no hooks for manipulation, no blind spots for flattery, no need to dominate, because he owns himself. And the man who owns himself is more dangerous than any tyrant, because he cannot be bought. He cannot be baited. He cannot be broken by what others think of him. He carries something sacred, something sovereign. Not the borrowed confidence of external validation, but the unshakable foundation of internal congruence. His yes means yes. His no means no. Not because he's stubborn, but because he's clear. And that clarity rooted in purpose, born of pain, sharpened by solitude, is what separates men who perform from men who embody. The world has enough performers. What it's starving for is presence. Presence that doesn't waver under pressure. Presence that holds its ground without raising its voice. Presence that doesn't seek to be the center, but becomes the center by being centered. That is masculine power. Not the kind passed down through empty traditions, not the kind built on fear, but the kind forged in the crucible of self-inquiry, where every illusion is stripped, every excuse burned, and all that remains is you. The real you. Not the you built to survive your father's anger. Not the you shaped by rejection or absence or approval addiction. Not the you that chases women, wealth, or status just to distract from the silence inside. But the you that is deeper than pain, older than the wound, wiser than the mask. The self not the ego's counterfeit, but the sovereign force that was always waiting beneath the noise. You cannot touch this power through performance. You can only become it by descending into the places you've denied, the guilt you never spoke, the rage you never faced, the grief you never gave permission to scream through your bones. You have to go there, because the only way out of the ego's prison is through it, through every dark corridor, through every lie you wrapped around your identity, through every moment where you pretended to be a man, when what you really were was afraid. Afraid to be vulnerable, afraid to be still, afraid to lose control. But listen carefully, that's where your throne is buried. Underneath the fear, not in avoidance, in ownership. And when you finally stop running, when you face the ego, not as an enemy, but as a part of you that is no longer needed, you rise. You rise without noise. You rise without needing the world to clap. You rise because the soul doesn't care about applause. It cares about truth. And truth does not flatter you. It forges you. It carves you down to your elemental core and asks, can you be this? Even when it costs you everything you once used to feel powerful. Masculine power is not about holding the world in your grip. It's about holding your center in the storm. The world will test you. People will misunderstand your silence. They'll mislabel your boundaries as coldness. They'll call your clarity arrogance. Let them, because real power doesn't chase perception. It doesn't need to be explained. It doesn't shrink to fit the narrative. It simply stands. And in that standing, everything begins to fall away quietly, painfully, beautifully. You don't need to dominate. You don't need to prove. You don't need to perform. You only need to remember that masculine power begins not in conquest, not in control, not in charisma, but in the sacred moment you choose to no longer serve your ego. Because the ego will scream. It will beg. It will whisper that without it, you are nothing, that your rage is your power, your image is your worth, your ability to control others is what makes you a man. But the ego is a liar, a clever one, a seductive one, but a liar all the same. It promises power, but delivers paranoia. It offers strength, but chains you to insecurity. It sells identity, but strips away your essence. And as long as you serve it, you will never be free. You will build empires and feel empty. You will win battles and feel hollow. You will collect trophies and still wake up haunted. Because power that comes from the ego can never satisfy. It only consumes. The more you feed it, the hungrier it becomes. Until one day you look in the mirror and realize you've built a life that looks powerful from the outside, but inside you're still that scared boy trying to be enough. So the question is not, can you be powerful? The question is, can you be whole? Because wholeness is a real revolution. Wholeness is what the world cannot manipulate. Wholeness is what the false systems of dominance cannot understand. And wholeness begins the moment you end your addiction to ego. The moment you trade image for intimacy with yourself, with truth, with God. The moment you stop performing masculinity and start embodying it. Not the performance of stoicism, but the essence of grounded strength. Not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of it. Not dominance over others, but dominion over your shadow. This is where masculine power is reborn. In stillness, in solitude, in sacred surrender to something larger than pride. Because the strongest man is not the one who commands the room. It's the one who can command himself when no one is watching. The one who chooses discipline when desire tempts him. The one who chooses purpose when the path grows dark. The one who chooses truth even when the truth costs him everything he used to call success. He may not be loud. He may not be liked. But when he walks into a room, you feel him. Not because he's trying to impress, but because he's done hiding. Because he no longer lives from ego. And that kind of freedom terrifies those who still do. So they will call him dangerous. And he is. Because a man who no longer bows to his ego is a man who can no longer be controlled. Not by fear, not by shame, not by desire. He is led by something older, something deeper, something unshakable. Truth. And when truth becomes your source of power, you become untouchable. Not untouchable in the sense of arrogance, but untouchable in the way a mountain is to the wind, in the way the ocean is to a matchstick flame, in the way a man rooted in truth becomes a force that cannot be moved by flattery, threat, or failure. You walk differently when you no longer need validation. You speak differently when you are not selling an identity. You choose differently when you are not escaping yourself. You no longer act from reaction, you act from revelation. A revelation that your power does not come from being above others, but from standing fully within yourself. That true leadership is not about climbing higher, but digging deeper. Deeper into discipline, deeper into presence, deeper into the silence that remains after the ego dies, because in that silence, something sacred rises. Not noise, not status, not control, but clarity. The kind of clarity that makes decisions without apology, that walks away from what is misaligned, that says no without the need to explain, justify, or soften the truth. You start to recognize what power really is. It's not how many follow you, it's how many you refuse to betray yourself for. It's not how loud you can speak, it's how clearly you can live. It's not in how much you control, but in how much you no longer need to. And that, right there, is the crucible every man must walk through if he wishes to be powerful in a way that doesn't destroy him. The death of the ego is not the end of you. It's the unveiling. It's the parting of the curtain. It's where you stop being a performance and start becoming a presence. That presence is the ultimate masculine gift. It heals without trying. It leads without demanding. It creates without needing recognition. And most of all, it endures. Because while empires built on ego rise and fall with the tides of time, a man who is no longer enslaved to his ego builds something eternal himself. And when you become that man, the world feels it. Not because you announce it, but because your silence becomes louder than their shouting. You walk into chaos and remain unmoved. You walk into temptation and remain unshaken. You walk into judgment and remain unmasked, because nothing can touch you. When you've already let go of everything false. This is the quiet truth they never taught you about power. It begins the moment you stop needing to be powerful. And in that moment, when the ego ends, masculine power finally begins. And what begins in that moment does not end. Because the man who has transcended ego does not need to reinvent himself every season. He doesn't need to chase new masks, new movements, new labels to stay relevant. He has become timeless, rooted not in trends, but in truth. And truth ages well. Truth does not erode. Truth does not decay under pressure, nor evaporate in isolation. It sharpens. It deepens. It becomes denser, more condensed with meaning, as life tests it. This is the architecture of the masculine, when it's no longer obsessed with its reflection, when it stops polishing the shell and begins cultivating the substance, when it stops performing power and starts living it in how he shows up for his purpose, in how he honors his word, in how he commands his emotions, not by suppression, but by channeling them into mastery. He may still feel anger, but he no longer reacts. He may still feel fear, but he no longer runs. He may still feel desire, but he no longer serves it, because his identity is no longer fused with his impulse. And when a man separates his identity from his emotions, his past, his performance, he becomes sovereign. That sovereignty cannot be inherited. It cannot be faked. It cannot be gifted through bloodline, status, or culture. It is forged through suffering, through silence, through the sacred act of shedding everything that is not essential. And once you become essential, you no longer need to defend yourself. You simply exist. And your existence becomes an example, a mirror, a frequency. Other men feel it not because you're louder, but because you're clearer. You don't need to compete, because no one can compete with a man who is only competing with yesterday's version of himself. You don't need to conquer, because you've already conquered the battlefield. That matters the one inside your own chest. And you don't need to control, because what you've cultivated can never be taken. That is masculine power. It doesn't declare itself. It doesn't chase titles or cling to thrones. It simply walks in the world with a presence that says, I know who I am, and I know who I'll never be again. You can feel that kind of man. He doesn't move with hesitation. He doesn't answer with confusion. He doesn't love with fear. He is decisive, direct, devoted to something larger than self. And because of that, his impact doesn't end when he exits the room. It echoes in the men he awakens, in the women who feel safer, in the culture he silently redefines, not with control, not with coercion, but with the one thing that can't be manipulated, embodied truth. Embodied truth does not argue. It does not negotiate. It does not seek permission to exist. It simply is. It lives in your breath. It lives in your choices. It lives in the way you respond when no one's watching, when the stakes are high, when it would be easier to slip back into the ego's arms and call it wisdom. But the man who has tasted real power, soul power, knows too much to go back. He knows that every time he abandons the ego, something sacred opens up. A wider vision, a deeper strength, a more quiet, unshakable confidence. He starts building not for applause, but for eternity. He stops reacting to the noise and begins shaping the frequency of the room. And not through dominance, but through devotion. Devotion to alignment, devotion to clarity, devotion to the man he told his younger self he would one day become. He does not control to feel safe. He creates safety through his presence. He does not speak to be heard. He speaks because his silence has already spoken. He doesn't chase influence. He becomes influenced by living so congruently with what is real that anything false cannot survive in his presence. And that's what makes him dangerous, not his capacity for destruction, but his refusal to lie. He will not lie to gain status. He will not lie to keep peace. He will not lie to avoid judgment. because he is no longer afraid of being misunderstood. That fear belongs to the ego, and he buried that long ago. So now when he walks into the room, it changes. Not because he demands it, because he is the change. Because he is proof living, breathing, silent proof that it is possible to be a man of power without pride, a man of strength without cruelty, a man of depth without performance. He leads not by shouting orders, but by becoming a signal. The signal that says, you can stop pretending now. You can stop posturing. You can stop defending what no longer feels real. You can stop clinging to an identity you outgrew 5 years ago. Because the moment you stop serving the ego, you step into the only power that lasts. The kind that doesn't depend on what others think. The kind that doesn't disappear when you fail. The kind that doesn't need to be louder because it's already everywhere you stand. Everywhere you stand becomes a sanctuary for what is real. Not because you control the space, but because you anchor it. You no longer enter rooms trying to be seen. You enter as the embodiment of something too deep to describe, too still to disrupt, too rooted to be moved. And that's when people feel it. Not your ego, not your image, but your essence. The part of you that cannot be explained, only experienced. And in a world so desperate for direction, that essence becomes a compass. It awakens what culture tried to sedate. It calls men back to their center. It whispers into the bones of the distracted, the addicted, the ashamed. There's something more than this. You've just forgotten who you are beneath the noise. And you don't have to say it out loud. You don't have to make content about it. You don't need to sell the message, because you are the message. Your discipline preaches it. Your stillness preaches it. Your ability to move through this life without needing to be everything for everyone, yet never abandoning who you are for anyone, that is the sermon. That is a signal. And when others feel it, they don't want to be like you. They want to be like them, but without the fear. They want to lead themselves. They want to strip off what no longer fits. They want to stop chasing, posturing, performing, and begin becoming, not as another mimic of a broken system, but as a sovereign man. And it all starts with one choice: to let the ego die, to walk through the discomfort of being unseen, to embrace the sacred loneliness that comes before true embodiment, to endure the silence that reveals the truth, and then to build from there, brick by brick, breath by breath, until the world no longer defines your power, because your presence does. And when that presence walks, it doesn't need to announce itself, because everyone already knows. Masculine power begins where ego ends. And once it begins, there is no turning back. So now the mirror waits, not for the version of you polished by pride, not for the echo shaped by culture, but for the man who has walked through fire and left the mask behind, not because he had to, because he chose to, chose truth over image, chose depth over dominance, chose silence over performance. The world doesn't need another ego in a suit. It needs the real you, the one that doesn't flinch in solitude, the one that leads without applause, the one that creates without needing credit. So let it end here. Let the ego go gracefully or screaming. Let it fall like dead weight. Let it burn, because what rises in its place is the man you were always meant to become. The one who doesn't perform strength, he embodies it. The one who doesn't seek power, he radiates it. The one who doesn't command attention, he commands respect, quietly, completely, forever. Not through control, but through presence Because now you know masculine power begins where ego ends. And the world will never forget the man who finally remembered himself.